Good day, everyone, and welcome to another session with Zaire, the SCALE Masterclass. I'm particularly excited about today's session, and you'll find out why in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, again, welcome. Whether you're on LinkedIn, or on YouTube, or watching this recording at a later date, we hope that you find the next hour particularly energizing and uplifting from a leadership point of view, because it is very true. Leadership and leading is very lonely at the top. So let's just jump right into it so that we don't lose too much time. I just want to do a quick intro on Zaire. So this is the Scale Masterclass that we host every 2 weeks with a different topic along our Scale framework. So for today's agenda, we will be introducing you very quickly to our Scale framework for those of you who haven't seen it before or haven't read our book. And then we'll go directly into our live Q&A with our special guest today, Britta Wolfkammer, and then close with a what next and a call to action to you as a leader. So why are we doing this masterclass? Why are we spending time every 2 weeks to just give information to the ecosystem? Well, Zara Consulting Africa, we're a strategy and management consulting firm, purpose driven, and our goal really is to build what we call African excellence for the global stage. And to do that, we need to empower ourselves, upskill ourselves, and help to build really resilient businesses. Who am I? I'm a founder just like you. I've been a CEO for the last 5 years. And before that was a strategic investor based out in Nairobi, investing €500 million across the continent. I've worked 25 years. This month will actually be my 25th year anniversary across 4 continents, started in North America, moving to Europe, and partially in Asia, and now have been back on the continent for almost 10 years. I spent most of those 25 years at multinational companies, and now I'm developing and have developed a scale framework. And the most important point is that I'm an Afro-optimist and really do believe in the future of our continent. Most of you would have completed our assessment. I answered a couple of questions as part of this masterclass, and here are the results that we've seen so far. It's interesting as we go from week to week to see that where strategy was such a strong area of focus in the past, we're starting to see much more, if we can go back again, a little bit more focus on the other 5 areas of the SCALE framework. Today, in particular, we'll be talking about leadership and seeing and giving some tips as you'd like to see and gain from a masterclass. So what is the SCALE framework? If we move to the next slide, basically it's a 5-step roadmap that brings you from here to there, right? So talking about transformation, talking about empowerment, and how do you actually turn your business from vision into reality? And that's looking at 5 areas. So the first area is strategy. It's the S area. So strategize your vision. Please, if you could click the slide. Strategize your vision. Next point is around champion excellence. And looking at excellence is around people. The third area is accelerating leadership. So we went from strategizing to people to the people who have to lead those people. Then we talk about corporate governance. And then last but not least, really expanding the impact that you've built within your company to the global stage. And today, we'll be focusing on accelerating exceptional leadership. And with that, let me introduce our guest for today. If we can bring her to the stage, we'll be joined shortly by Britta Wolfkammer. Britta is the founder and director of Coaching Across Borders. Welcome, Britta. Britta is an award-winning coach, executive and team coach, a certified facilitator with 1,000+ coaching hours. So she's spending one of those coaching hours with us, and we're very grateful for that. A seasoned expert for driving transformative change and growth across Africa, having lived in Kenya for the last 10 years, coached clients across 12 countries. I have to confess that I'm one of those clients. So I'm very thrilled to have Britta share the support and knowledge that she gave to me during my time in Kenya with all of you. So Britta, please welcome.
Thank you so much, Adeolu, for that warm welcome. I'm so happy to be here and give a little bit of insight of my 5 years of being a full-time coach, particular coaching leaders across Africa. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. So let's just jump right into it, Britta. So we talked about accelerating leadership, specifically accelerating exceptional leadership. And so I'd like to hear from you. What does that mean for you? So, we want to drive profound impact. You've had extensive experience, yes, more than the 5 years. You've been a leader and are a leader yourself in multiple countries and multiple continents. What do you think are the top one or two distinguishing qualities or shifts you've observed in leaders who truly accelerate growth and impact in complex markets, particularly markets here in Africa?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question. And I think skill number one is to not keep it to yourself and to be able to build others. So you become the multiplier and you can step back and focus on what you as a leader need to do and letting others be part of the co-creation. And and then number two, I believe that connects to your S is, and what we actually, especially in the smaller scale businesses, do not always see is to have a profound vision and strategy in place and be able to communicate, not only put it on the wall, to also be able to communicate that to the people you are leading. That makes sense.
Okay. So it's about co-creation and even more importantly around having a vision and a strategy, not just having the vision and strategy, but able to communicate. Like in any relationship, communication is the key,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
Fine.
And
Yeah.
sorry, do you
Sorry.
want to add? Mhm.
It's instead of you being the sole kind of leader and the sole hero, you multiply and bring it over to the others. Yeah.
Okay, so it's good that you talked about being the sole leader because it is lonely at the top. That's a phrase that is heard often. I can speak for myself to confirm that it's particularly lonely, whatever that top is. So CEO of a subsidiary, CEO of a group company, or even a founder of a two-person shop. uh, there are immense burdens, pressures. You're up at night, perhaps thinking about the families who are counting on your business actually making money, dealing with shareholders who may or may not be based on the continent. Many of them are not based on the continent, so don't understand the complexities we have to deal with on a daily basis. So but we have to deal with it. Like we have to move forward. We can't show that to our teams. So how do you advise that we as leaders actually transform this weight, this really heavy weight, into motivation and leverage to move forward and actually excel in our jobs?
Yeah. You're kind of putting it into my lab and into my marketing lab. So one of the things, of course, that's why coaches are there, because it provides you with the confidential. I mean, I think the key. Let's step back a little bit. Being lonely at the top, where does that come from? It's part of that. You cannot discuss the decisions you have to make
Yep.
with anyone, and also what's maybe different, if I may say so, from my own experience on this continent and or country where I live in, is everything is more community knit, and it's a small world, it's a small bubble you live in. So a small leak or a small discussion can lead to personal implications for the leader, because you're kind of carried by the community. And so it becomes even more important that you have a space where you can let go of your pressure outside of that tight-knit community and have a confidential space, and then also maybe look outside of your own pond. And then also we have cultural differences and traditional cultural beliefs, especially now I'm referring to, in my experience, men speaking about, what pressures they have and emotions is maybe also a bit different on this continent. And in general, it's different versus to women. So I've had a very, like a CEO, financial sector, in the financial sector in East Africa. And that was one of his challenges, really, to have someone to let go of the pressure, just not even help taking decisions, but just speaking through some of the challenges and some of the decisions he needed to make. And then coaching, coaching is the remedy.
Coaching is the remedy. Okay, to talk to us a bit more about that. And as you're talking to us about that, please, to our audience, drop your questions. We have some questions that I have some questions for Britta as my former coach, but we are very happy to hear your questions as well. We want this to be an interactive session. So please, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on LinkedIn, please drop your questions. We'll see them on screen and we'll answer them as quickly as possible.
Sorry, what
Please,
was, yeah,
coaching.
please go.
Many people wouldn't understand what coaching is. Maybe you just help us with.
So coaching is basically eye-level conversation in a very confidential space. Coaches are trained to be coaches, are trained to have conversations that trigger the other person, the coachee, so to say, to look deeper inside. So we use different tools to get the coachee to think deeper and reflect. We, by default, do not necessarily give advice because that means giving advice, we will also take the responsibility, and what maybe looks good for me as an advice, maybe not the perfect advice for the coachee, because we never know 360 degrees what goes on in his life and in his personality. So the more sustainable solution is really to create a conversation where the coachee is prompted to look deeper and think deeper, and come up with his or her own solutions. And the conversation itself, it may sound funny, but what sits in your head is one thing, but the process between having a thought and articulating it either into words or on paper is a very, very important process that generates ideas and insights. So you will need to have a person to get to your best insights to talk to.
Okay. So I want to get into that more. But before we talk more about coaching, so you had mentioned before around communication, communicating your vision, communicating your strategy, and knowing that even the best strategy needs exceptional leadership. What are the best ways that people can actually change voice their vision from the top and put it into an executable strategy that their people, the teammates will actually understand?
Yeah, I love that question. And it is one of my favorite topics to create vision, missions, and strategies. So one is so it depends a little bit what kind of company it is, but since we're talking more about startups and founder driven, is to really have a passion and a vision to start with. And usually if it's a founder driven business, the founder has a vision of why this business is in place and what you want to achieve as the founder or as the CEO of this company. And then it becomes a strategy. So one in a nutshell, one is, can we co-create this? I used to do a lot of workshops about co-creation. Can we co-create? That creates inclusivity and accountability and responsibility to co-create together with a team. And it also multiplies ideas because, as a swarm, we have more brains in the pace and we may come up with more ideas. So one is to have a vision as the leader, first of all, then to have a co-creative strategy. And then now, what does that mean, your vision and your values, in terms of the actions and steps you need to take, and also how you collaborate, how you treat each other, how do you behave, how do you work together. What are the do's and what are the don'ts in your workplace? So to have that, not only, a lot of times we see those values. Everyone can say them by heart. Yeah, our values are yada, yada, yada. But then if you dig deeper, so how do you show up? How do you show that value? How does that come up in your everyday work life? That's often where it stops. And that is the most important part. And I like to state one of my favorite examples for a vision, and it's not from it's from IKEA. Ingvar Kamprad has created his Testament of a Furniture Dealer, I think, when he was only 18 years ago, and I'm still getting goosebumps. I used to work for IKEA, and it still
Okay.
stands. Everyone can Google Testament of a Furniture Dealer, and it's 10 sharp sentences. And if you go work for IKEA, you will find these testaments, these 10 sentences everywhere until to date. So that's my favorite example of having a strong vision and value concept that feeds you
And
through.
do you still remember these 10 sentences?
No, I don't.
Oh.
But just me on the wrong foot. No, I don't. I do remember. Definitely when I look at them, it's
Yeah.
it's about kind of like about, for example, so one of them is, for example, it's for the many people, it's inclusivity, which you will see everywhere in IKEA, and making furniture, designed furniture, like modern furniture. That is one of them. Many people, not just for exclusive people, for many that everyone can afford. That's one of them. Then there was one about communication. It needs to be communicated in a simple way and not in a kind of PhD elaborate kind of language.
Yeah.
So everyone needs to be able to understand. No 10 bracket sentence, short sentences, clear communication. Something like that. So those are two I
Mm.
remember.
Mm. No, but it's interesting that there are some companies who make these like long mission statements that no one will ever remember, and they have so much jargon inside that you're wondering if the employees even understand them, talk less of their customers or their clients. And similar to you, I still remember our mission, my mission statement, or the mission statement in my very first company, which was making the world a better place to work.
Yeah,
And it was short, it was to the point, it was clear, it was motivating, and I still remember it, 15 years later or so. So, and this is when we know, as leaders, whether we've really been able to communicate the vision. I think they like to say that if a fifth grader can understand it, or are you able to explain it to a fifth grader, a 10-year-old,
yeah,
for people to
that's
understand, yeah, 10-year-old, then that's the level you want to keep your communications.
exactly. And my mission is, just on a light note, my mission is making leadership great again.
Making leadership great again. Okay, love it, love it. Making leadership great again.
Mhm.
Okay, that has some ties to somewhere else, but we won't talk about that.
That's a notch on it, yes, for the same, for a purpose to kind of stick out. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, okay, good, good. So, please, again, for our audience, I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but still, please drop your questions. As soon as we sort those out, we'll be able to see those questions and be able to respond. Our Britta will be able to respond to those as quickly as possible. So let's go to thinking about authentic leadership, or being authentic, which has become a little bit of a buzzword in the last couple of years. But we're both women. We're both women leaders. And you've touched on a little bit briefly on some of the differences you've seen in when you coach men versus women. So in those experiences, and even as yourself as a woman leader, how have you seen your clients navigate and challenge gender stereotypes in what are mainly male dominated corporate spaces, whether we're talking about financial services or telecoms, etc. And really talk about, if we could talk about how we can leverage our uniqueness as women, which will be different from woman to woman and from culture to culture. You as a German, me as a Nigerian who didn't grow up in Nigeria, we'll approach things, even though we're both women, in very different ways. How do we leverage that uniqueness rather than trying to conform to whatever the local stereotype is?
Yes, yeah, and that's an interesting topic, and I've had quite a few very, very successful female leaders in yeah, energy, a very male-driven sector, actually. Energy,
Mhm.
for example, financial
Mhm.
sector, micro finance in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and some other countries, and often it's about the belief that they need to work, or maybe it's true, I cannot verify that, harder, that they feel they need to work hard. Also in the context, in the cultural context, it's not much different in the Western world, but even here, the mother role and the working woman, which is maybe not according to traditional views, as you have said, becomes a double burden. And then there's a lot of negative self-talk and expectations on self. So we do see, or in my practice, in my experience, I do see a lot of very, very, very highly educated, PhD educated to the top women in excellent roles on the top, CEO, who still have what they see as an imposter syndrome, or who still believe they're not good enough in what they're doing. So that's, I think, where it starts, and it becomes a lot about how do I fit into the expectations of others, and they try to fit into the mold. So the change here is to work on how, what's your true self? Who do you want to be as a leader? What do you want people to say in 20 years about you? So to come to kind of define in a safe space, who are you, who you want to be, how do you want to seen, how do you want to be seen, and how do you want to lead? What's important? Then it comes down to values, to your own value system. So that first the respective leader defines in a safe space, explores about herself and who she wants to be as a leader. And then we look at the challenges. For example, there was negotiation challenges where, wanting to be too nice and giving it away. So we work on that. What is it first to explore? What do you want in a safe space? What do you want to say? What do you want? If this was a true space, what's the best outcome for you? And then what is the fear? What's the worst that can happen? So these are very simple coaching conversations we're having. And and then, but the most important is that the leader herself knows. Often they don't know who they want to be as a leader. So because it's all external driven, it's all how I, and maybe also due to traditional education, how do I need to show up? What do I need to do? Who's going to tell me what to do? Instead of now coming from inside and having your own wishes and expectations
Right.
internal.
And I love that, uh, who do I want to be as a leader? And that's something that all of us should ask ourselves. And it's something that I was told to ask myself when I became a parent, and thinking about how my parenting style might influence my leadership style, and vice versa. We have a question on the floor, so let's take that question from Precious. Thank you for your question, Precious. Co-creation, that's a term that you've mentioned already a couple of times, and I think that's a term that people need some help understanding. What does that mean? How do you co-create a strategy, and how does it relate to executing and communicating your overarching strategy?
Wonderful question. Thank you so much for this great question. So co-creation has become a very trendy, as has authentic leadership, where also there's a lot of blurry about what's that authentic mean actually. So co-creation we use a lot in adult education and coaching, as also facilitation. That means traditionally there is a telling approach. The teacher tells the pupil, yeah? The leader tells his staff what to do. That's the frontal mono frontal communication style and creation style. Here's my strategy. Here's my strategy. Go and execute. Now, in co-creation, we include our teams, our maybe the next level or second level. What would you think? How we should do our strategy? What's important? And we include others, so we don't make it all from our head. We also call it swarm wisdom, as in many have more ideas than just one. If I just
Mhm.
create a strategy by myself, or in my 3 people leadership team, we only use 3 brains, yeah, and we also all on the leadership team, so we may not know what the next level comes up with. They maybe see more than we do because they're maybe closer to the customer or to whatever, yeah. So so that's what we call co-creation. Co as in we create together, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yep. Yep. So there was a more great conversation so far. Thank you, Jude. So was there something you wanted to add, or sound like you wanted to say one more point, Britta?
Oh, no, no, no. I just, there
Okay.
was,
Okay.
sorry. So there was something about how does that relate to execution and communication.
Yes. 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 Hmm.
So that's the second part of the question, which is also very important, because now see, when you co-create, you have more inclusivity and more people are part of your strategy. They don't feel excluded. So when they're part of the strategy and feel they have been able to also input their thoughts, then it becomes easier, hopefully, later to execute. And the communication becomes easier because some people have been part of that strategy creation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's been my experience as well. So I think that top-down strategies where they just come from above and get gifted to you are much more difficult in my experience to communicate, because even as the CEO, and if you're getting the strategy from the group and you weren't part of creating that strategy, people are asking you questions, very good questions, and you want to toe the party line, but since you weren't part of the process, it becomes a bit tougher for you to be able to explain it, maybe in a very digestible way. So, but if the more people, I'm not saying, particularly if you run a large company, you can't, 1,000 people may not be part of the strategy formulation. Although I've been in companies where they've done that,
Yeah.
right? You know, they found a way to really make sure that every single person is part of the strategy development process.
Just since you're saying that, just right now, I've been facilitating an inclusive constitution for, and this is not confidential, it's all over the internet. I've been facilitating workshops, many across Africa, to build an inclusive constitution for a cryptocurrency company,
Okay.
including all members globally. We have facilitated 60 workshops to include members to input their views to the constitution. So it is possible. Of course, it may be costly, and not always feasible. But the other part is it creates, now I forgot the word. I just had it on the mind. Not accountability. I'll get to that word in a minute. I just lost it. It's more sustainable ownership,
Ownership.
because
Yes.
it
Hmm.
creates ownership.
Hmm.
You have been part of the building the strategy, and a lot of times, even in NGOs, I needed to come in because, oh, we need a strategy because we don't get donor funding because our strategy expired like 4 years ago.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of firefighting, and obviously
Hmm.
that doesn't really help much, because anyone just can come in, any consultant, and give you a strategy, but the strategy has a purpose. Right. So, and it doesn't need to be a fancy 50-page document. It can be a one-pager as long as you start somewhere. It's important to have a path. And since we're talking about Africa,
Hmm.
one thing is that often the strategies are stiff, 5-year plan, right? But it's the one of the how do I say, one of the things here is it's very volatile. Things can change. They change in Europe, they change in the US, as we've seen just now. But there is more volatility, I feel, here on the continent. So we needs to be kind of juicy so we can adapt. And that's one of the big leadership skills as well, adaptability, without be going into crisis mode and freeze.
Hmm. Okay. Good. So Precious has kicked off quite an interesting discussion around co-creation, and the fact that you can actually co-create across an entire continent, it sounds like, or even globally.
Globally,
and
yes,
to,
yes, very,
to build
yeah.
together a strategy that is owned by everyone. Good. So let's talk about decision making as a leader. As we know, as leaders, leadership often requires making very tough and impactful, not always in a positive way, decisions for our organization, unpopular decisions. So, based on your experience implementing challenging initiatives, and let's take redundancy programs as one example. That's probably the one of the toughest decisions, if not the toughest decision as a leader. I've gone through it myself.
Mhm.
How do you balance empathy with the responsibility of leading this company through for the long term? So the short term, you have to go through the short term pain of letting go of sometimes some very good people, so that the company itself lasts in the long term. Just some tips for us.
Yes, so I have both had to do redundant. I had to deliver redundancy, so I had to kind of head counts. You know this, Adeolu, head counts.
Mhm.
Very
Yes.
unethic way of reduce your head counts. And but I've also been affected by redundancies twice, and very differently delivered. So what I can say, and the question was, it was decisions versus empathy. Yes.
Mhm.
So I think, okay, my power just went off. I think the most important is to just plugging it in here in my backup. The
Mhm.
most important
Mhm.
about decisions is how do you deliver and communicate your decision. And so when, especially with redundancy programs, one is communications. And I see it in my practice every day where we have big companies, small companies, redundancy programs, especially the leader who's in the middle suffers because he wants to tell his team what's going on, but he can't because he doesn't have the full information. So, holding back because of fear, holding back, or we don't know ourselves, is creating a lot of uncertainty. So, these decisions and empathy and redundancy also comes with the next point. How do we actually navigate uncertainty? But let's go back to so one is it's the ability to um, nonviolent communication and like first of all early communication as much as
Mhm.
possible. Keep them in the loop. What's going to happen and why?
Mhm.
If possible, have a support program. I mean financially that might not always be possible, but empathy
Mhm.
comes from listen to the needs of your
Mhm.
employees. What do they need? And then also sometimes it's just an open door for the leader to listen to their worries. And I think the most important is honest, not stories, because
Mhm.
that's not going to help. And I've been in both. I've been through an redundancy round with a very open communication and a very held back communication, and it creates trust if you open up early, even though you don't know. Um, and
Mhm.
empathy, I've written down what one of my biggest practices I do is giving constructive feedback in a
Mhm.
nonviolent way, is the ability, because sometimes it's not only about redundancy programs, it's also about taking a tough decision about non-performers. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's you have to take these decisions to keep the rest of the company sane and to protect
Mhm.
others,
Yeah. It's not
dependents,
that
right?
apple could spoil the rest, right?
That's exactly. So if you wait too long out of fear, that can backfire and have a bigger impact. So one of the things, there's a lot of methodology and practice. How do you deliver constructive feedback for non-perform or in general conflict conversations?
Mhm.
And lots of frameworks and how you bring this over in a non-violent, because our natural communication is very, it puts you in a corner and it puts you in a defense mode. So we
Mhm.
want to that.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, that's my 5 cents into tough decision. It's about honesty, and it comes back to authenticity. All of that connects. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Good. Treat
and
people as adults, treat people like the way that you would want to be treated if you were in a situation.
exactly, and listen into your, that's the perspective change, being the ability to change your perspective into, okay, I have this person in front of me. How would I react? What would I want to hear? That's a big coaching question. Like, it's a tool also to try
But
to
I
put
want
the
to hear.
other,
Okay.
what would I do in this situation? What would I want my boss to tell me?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. I like
How,
that. What would I want to hear?
mhm.
Yeah. So that, maybe that flows right into the question that we have on screen from Kate KO. What differentiates good leadership from bad leadership? That's a very big question.
Yeah, it's a,
And I would even argue that is a bad leader even a leader? But I would be eager to hear your thoughts on this.
yeah, it's a topic for itself, and I think it ties back to our first, very first start. What defines accelerating leadership?
Mhm.
Basically, leader is a leader who's able to step back and to multiply, not to be a one-man show, to co-create, to empower, to communicate. So I think when we talked about the skills about accelerating leadership, those were the skills that I see are key in being a good leader, being able to multiply, as in stepping back and co-create, um, and yeah, have a good vision and to communicate a good vision and strategy to your team, and be able to listen to what your team needs. If you have closed doors, which is still a very common
Mm.
practice, if you have closed doors, I think that will also show how open you are.
It's interesting. I'm glad you brought up the idea of closed doors and people. I think leaders, particularly senior leaders, underestimate the impact a closed door can have on company culture. I remember when we were renovated offices in one of my former roles, and I had said that we were going to have open space for everyone, even the leaders. And there was definitely a bit of pushback from the senior leadership. Weren't used to that. So okay, how will I have my conversations? I need my space. I need to have my office. And my response to them at the time was, well, I'm planning to have an open space and sit in open space. So are you saying that you need a different setup than I do as your leader? And that kept people quiet. And I think that it definitely drove a shift in the company culture. Not saying that it was closed before, but the fact that anyone, including myself, could just get up and walk around and on different floors and people could interact with me or they could come up to my floor and interact with me made a huge difference for.
Yes, I don't know if it's on my side. You're frozen now. Can you still hear me? I have full bars here. Um, I just continue talking. Can you hear me or can see? Okay, so it's on. Let me continue talking while maybe Adeolu can see if she can fix. Um, So whoever asked that question about good and bad leadership, I want to throw a coaching question. I think, who defines good or bad leadership? Yeah, what differentiates good KDKU? I hope I pronounce it correctly. What differentiates good leadership from bad leadership? I think there is no default of what we see as good and what we see as bad. Now, if you look from your own perspective, what would you like your leader to do? How would you like your leader to show up and treat you and communicate with you? So that's one of the techniques we use. What do you see as a good? Yeah, if you answer that question, I think then you answer. And what would be you consider as a bad leader? When would you say, oh, that's really bad leadership? So I think that's how we can answer that question.
Okay, great. So apparently it was me who went off. I wasn't quite sure, so I'm glad to be back with you. And this is a good way to go into our next question, which is around championing and really flows from what we've said so far, and even the recent question around good versus bad leadership. Championing innovative approaches like flexible work. That's become a big topic in the last few years since COVID. COVID is already 4 or 5 years ago, so maybe it's not few anymore. Time goes by quickly. But how can we as leaders foster a culture of trust and empowerment through things like strategic flexibility, boosting productivity, morale, so some of what we said about co-creation, etc. Even if the professional environment that we work in, whether it be Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, whatever country, maybe that's not the traditional norm.
Yeah, and that's I'm glad you're saying that. It would be a bit more harder for me to say it, but yeah, let's start there because that's actually how I see it as well. The tradition it comes from the traditional education system and the traditional culture, so it will not be the same as in other continents maybe,
Mhm.
and it will maybe take more time. That doesn't mean we can't build trust, but so one, a leader builds trust by, it always starts with yourself, by being vulnerable, right? If you as a leader, that's a big skill as well, and a big capability to be able to be vulnerable. You don't need to show your open wounds, but to be able to, being vulnerable, to you show you're human and you're also making mistake. So that will create trust. So and then in terms of flexibility, in terms of workspaces, yes, but there's also the element of having flexible strategies, right? How can we adapt to crisis? How can we be? I think one of the things here, what I said earlier, is to be able to adapt to changes, political environment, weather. We are like the continent is so vulnerable from the rest of the world and so dependent. And so how are we able to adopt and keeping our cool as leaders? And that
Mhm.
comes to emotional agility. How are we? Are we bursting out? Are we stressed? Are we keeping our cool? And trust, yes, trust is stepping up with vulnerability and honesty, and then the empowerment comes in co-creation, being able to include and co-create, um, and give responsibility to your team,
Mhm.
so that they are step. If you step back, and then that also means you can empower your team. Yeah, it's easier said than done. I know.
I'm going to go off track a little bit with you around trust, right? Just interested to hear your perspective here. So, is trust earned or given?
Okay, what do you think? Let's ask the audience. What does the audience think?
I'd love to hear what you think. So, is trust earned or given? And by that, what I'm asking is, do you give trust and allow that from the beginning, from the get go, and then only if someone does something to disabuse you of your trust, then you've taken it back away, or does someone have to? Should someone have to work for your trust? So
That's a
you're
very,
cautious in the beginning,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then once they've earned your trust, then you trust them. So please drop
yeah.
your comments, our listeners. I'd love to hear what you think, even as Britt is giving her thoughts.
Great question, Adeolu. And let's be very clear here. There's no wrong or right. Please don't.
No,
You
there's
need to
none.
look at others. Please write what you think. There is no wrong or right. I tell you in a minute why. That is a very cultural connected
Mhm.
question. So if you now ask me, and you know this because you worked in Germany and I am German by
Mhm.
background, but I worked in Sweden, which is very different from Germany,
Mhm. I can
which a
imagine.
lot which a lot of people would not understand because Germany and Sweden is just as close as Kenya and Tanzania, yet it's so different.
Mhm.
So in my culture, um, you have to earn your trust. So you
Yeah.
see someone does a job, yeah, you do, and here it's so different. Here in Kenya, it's relationship based. You know someone, you trust someone. So it's not really a
Or you know
question.
someone who knows someone, you still trust them.
So that's the relation. So I don't know how to explain it, but it's very relationship in Kenya, and I guess
Mhm.
that applies for a lot of African countries. I know Africa is not a continent, but yet there are traits that are similar. And so in my culture, it doesn't matter if I know you or not. Even if I don't know you, if you do the job well, I trust you. In a nutshell. Here, it's very relationship based.
Mm.
Or someone brings someone that you know well, brings someone in that the person you know well knows, then you already trust them. For me, that doesn't really work. So it is a very cultural
I
sensitive.
have problems there too. Yes, yes. Yeah, I interrupted you, but I've had so many people who will send me a CV. I've worked with the person, so I'm willing to recommend that person. But then they'll send me a CV saying, "Oh, this is my sister. This is my whatever
Struggling.
uncle. This is my son, my cousin." And I'm thinking, but I don't know them. I've never worked with them. I can't, in good conscience, recommend them to somebody else because I don't have any form of interact. I don't even know who they are. I can recommend you, and yes, I know that they're somehow related or they're a friend or whatever, but I don't have that comfort level. So that's that's it's interesting you bring that up from the relationship because I think the expectation is probably that, oh, but you know me, so you'd be willing to recommend anyone I recommend, which I'm not there.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So I mean, for me, more in general, is trust. Oh, here we have someone from Kade. Maybe you want to read that out, Adeolu?
Yeah, sure. So I've seen some people who have already jumped in to say that trust is earned, and here as a longer response, I think it'll depend on the scope of what you lose if the trust is broken. Some trust can be engaged on earning trust, while others can be built from low trust to high trust. I think it varies. Okay.
Yeah, so I think also trust comes from yeah, first of all, vulnerability. If the leader can show that he's able to open up and be vulnerable, and shows that I'm not special, I'm not on my king chair or palace. I'm human. I'm touchable, and approachable. Also, if the leader, that comes with open and closed door policy. If the leader is approachable and is there to listen, that creates a lot of trust. Listen to what the other. Empathy creates trust, and then honesty, honest conversation, saying something that will you might not want to say because it's something bad or something that you wouldn't normally say. If the leader can step out of the comfort zone, that will create trust. Mhm.
I love to hear what you think about this statement. Trust can also be borrowed if we think about how reviews and referrals work.
Yeah. Yeah, the review and referral is on a different, that's the different conversation, because I personally, and that's now my I mean, reviews and referrals, anyone can write a referral, right? So
Referral, yes.
yes, and yeah, so it is really, it if you can show and if you can articulate what you've done, and that can be proven. Like if someone tells me I've created this e-commerce platform for this and that company, and I've led that project, and can go into detail how they've done it and what challenges and what, and so you see, and then you verify. That's kind of the way I want to see it.
I'll challenge you on that though, Britta. So you're a coach, but I'm sure you know about sponsors, right? And maybe you can help the audience understand what the difference between a coach and a sponsor is. But that's exactly what a sponsor does, right? So a sponsor will talk about you in rooms where you're not, and you don't even know. So they're championing you, and championing you to other people who may or may not know you, right? So it goes back to the question about referrals and etc. So how do you then sort of reconcile that in what you just said? That the person
No,
still has to tell me what they've done.
okay, so no, I didn't think about the sponsor. It's just like if I get a CV or if I have a job interview and the person can explain to me. Of course, if there's a reliable sponsor, but just a referral letter or just that's, I think a sponsor is a bit,
Okay.
if
Yeah,
to
yeah.
me, it's
Okay.
A
It's
sponsor,
much more.
because a referral letter can just be anyone who knows the person and who has worked with the person as a
Mm,
leader, and they might
mm,
be connected. I mean, how many companies have their brothers and sisters and cousins? Yeah,
mm,
it's a common way of doing things.
mm,
And so if the sponsor is someone senior in the company that's sponsoring your career because they want you to be higher up in the company and they believe in you, rather than having an external referral. A sponsor, I believe, is different. A sponsor who is maybe sponsoring your MBA or your coaching journey. Like I work with sponsors a lot because they are paying for my
mm,
clients' coaching in that not.
mhm. Okay. Okay. Good. Well, that one definitely stirred up a lot of commentary from the audience. Glad that we could warm you up. Let's take the conversation a little bit to back to something you mentioned about being vulnerable. And here the question is from Adeolu. Thank you, Adeolu, for your question. Isn't being vulnerable dangerous for a startup? Some executives join startups claiming to be in on the vision, but are unwilling to make financial sacrifice to get the business going. Some hide their agenda while earning from the company, which appears dishonest, but they interpret it as being diplomatic. Wow, that's an intense one.
Yeah, that's intense. So let's break this up
Yeah,
because
let's
I think
break it down.
yeah,
Mhm.
I think there are three topics in this sentence. And so, what I mean with vulnerable, what I meant with vulnerable is to be human, to have feelings, to say, yesterday I was stressed, or oh, okay, this is bothering me, or this is worrying me, or you don't need to kind of open up your whole bucket of wounds where you're like, or with vulnerability, I mean to show you're human and to actually see there are some kind of senses that are affecting you. You're not the ice cold manager who goes through thick and thin without anything, right? That's what I mean,
Mm,
if that makes sense. So, and with executives who join startups claiming to be on the vision, Adeolu, I think we had a conversation on that one some time back, yeah, but are
yes.
unwilling to make financial sacrifice to get the business going. I'm not sure if this goes to vulnerability. So vulnerable being dangerous for a startup. If it if it is the vulnerability I meant, is just showing emotions in a way,
Yeah.
not
That
breakdowns.
we're
You
not
don't,
machines.
yeah, that we're not machines. You don't need to break out down crying. That's not what I meant. Having like a heart attack or a burst, like emotional burst. That is one thing. So, and going into executives not willing to make financial sacrifices, I think that's a different topic.
Yeah.
And then there was something else at the end that I now forgot.
Okay, okay, yes. No, but I think you've addressed the question. I think in the interest of time, there are additional comments I see and questions popping up. Here is taking us back to the previous one. Trust is earned. It happens over time, even without you knowing, which I think is very true. People are watching all the time, and that's something that some of us sometimes forget. And I've seen people burn bridges in the way they leave companies, leave relationships, etc. And they forget that this is a very small world. So you don't know when you're going to encounter this person again. Let's go on to our next question. Is manipulation necessary for good leadership? That can be taken multiple ways. Let's see how we address that one.
But thank you. I love the open questions here to the audience. Thank you so much for showing up authentically and having really great, honest questions. I really like that. So I would like to throw this back to Kade or Kadi. What do you think manipulation, the word manipulation, and now I'm talking about myself. Manipulation in my world is never the way to go. It's bad, it's criminal, it's cruel. Anything that's manipulated should not be considered anything good. It's manipulation in itself. You're faking things, you're manipulating. That can never be good. And it's different from being diplomatic in my
Yes,
world.
yes, yes, yes.
Diplomatic is
Diplomacy and manipulation are not the same thing. Yeah,
very
I agree with
different. Manipulating is consciously doing something wrong or differently, like consciously faking something. Or and diplomacy is about communication. I am not a very diplomatic person. I wish I was more
You're
diplomatic.
German.
I'm German. Could never be an ambassador. So this leads us to so many other. Where's the difference between diplomacy and authenticity? That's a
Mhm.
very tough
Yeah.
question.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
let's go with the Joseph has or Adeolu, I give it back to you because you're the
Oh,
one
sure,
who's there.
sure. I'm not sure that I want to address this question because it does take us back, and I just want to address one more question which hasn't popped up yet on the screen, but is off to the side. And any questions we haven't managed to answer, we'll go back and do our best to answer on LinkedIn. But here's another question from an anonymous LinkedIn user. In a company where workers know that earning the manager's trust leads to being favored, how can you distinguish between butt kissers or people who are actually trustworthy? If I can reword that question.
In a company where workers know that earning the manager's trust leads to being favored, how can you distinguish between genuinely trustworthy?
And those who are just sort of
Yes,
playing the game
yes,
to get the
these are
trust.
the bro nosers or butt kissers. Yeah, yeah. How can you, as a leader, distinguish between these two people? Is that the
Yes.
question?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That seems to be a
Yes.
question. Yeah.
I think that needs to be leadership skill to be able to see it, and I want my leader to see it because I do not want to me as a person. If I have to, sometimes we see the pleasers, the butt kissers, and we think, oh my God, do I need to do the same now to get? And for a good
Exactly.
leader, the person can see it. I trust my leader; the person can see when someone is sugarcoating or pleasing or yeah, because it takes me away from the focus of the work I need to do because I need to now be busy with um, insincere just to gain favor. I think a good leader will be able to distinguish. Intuition is that what is needed here,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
that makes sense.
Trusting your gut. I would
If
like.
you sorry, just if in a company where if you pull this up, yeah, manipulation is evil. That's I sign that. In a company where workers know that earning the manager's trust leads to being favored, that is not a good manager. Sorry, because if the
Yeah,
managers
that's a good point.
own that, no,
Mhm.
that's and but then who is the judge here? Who is the judge that the earning the manager's trust leads to being favored? Who is verifying that that's actually happening? We
Yeah,
have to be
yeah.
careful here.
And
I'm just
perception is a
pulling this up.
powerful thing. Yeah, perception is a powerful
Percept
thing.
liars and so on. So I'm all flagging if as long as there's no proof, and it's hard to prove.
Yeah, yeah, but it's important as a leader
Yeah.
to counter that perception. Not always easy. How do you manage perception? But I think it's important to be very intentional about countering that perception that people can curry favors with you as a leader. That's been my experience. I'd like to take one last question, Britta. This one is again from Precious. If we can maybe try to pull it up, but in the meantime, I'll read it from my screen. So Precious is asking, is it okay to slightly refine your vision into a more articulate and emotional way, even after you've communicated it already? So, for example, after a while, you realize the crafted vision doesn't really meet the exact idea. Uh, would it be okay to iterate? So, what I'm getting from the way he's phrased the question is, uh, so to be able to shift and pivot even after you've maybe co-created and communicated, etc., without losing people's trust that okay, you agreed on one thing, why are you now changing it to a different thing? Let me interpret the question like that.
Yeah, I didn't get the first part, so let me just repeat to see if I got it right. So it's
Mhm.
about a vision, and then all of a sudden you see the vision not be fit for purpose anymore because of, and you want to change or pivot.
Exactly, without
So
losing your team's trust. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So a vision is something rather very long term that's usually holds for forever, like making leadership great again. It will not what your vision was, or what Ingvar Comfort, making design furniture for the many people. That vision is pretty. What can shake that vision? What's more of maybe we can talk about strategy. A strategy
Right.
might be more volatile. You have a 5-year strategy, usually maybe, or 3 years, and then things change. And that's what I mean with adaptability. And so the trust comes in as long as you can communicate why. And
Mhm.
maybe even better if you can include, again, co-create the pivot, the shift, so that then you also have, it's about change. And in change management, for a different topic, in change management, you first of all describe why we need to change, what will change, and you bring in people who are ambassadors to champion that change. So if you can include people in the change of your strategy, and if you can communicate why this is necessary, then it normally won't erode trust. But then again, out of 100%, you may carry 80 people with you, and then 20 you lose, or 10 you lose, and then you need to decide. I think you can always never be perfect in keeping everyone on board.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. And I know there are many more questions. Our people, and we see it here. And as I said, we'll try to answer all these questions and comments on LinkedIn. In the interest of time, we have run out of time. Life is complicated. I like it. Life is complicated. Being a leader is complicated. But just think about, who do you want to be as a leader? So, Britta Wolfkammer, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure we'll have you on again, but I appreciate you taking the time. And I knew that those coaching gems that you gave me so many number of years ago would be helpful for others as well. So, thank you again, Britta.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And thanks for the audience also to bringing in your questions. It's been absolutely fun to be here and be challenged. Thank you.
Good, glad. Thank you, Britta. And as we close out this session, I just want to quickly talk about your next steps. So we focused today on the A part of the scale, our scale framework. There's still 4 other parts to think about and to consider. So I welcome you. We welcome you to scan the URL code. We will also drop the URL itself in the follow-up emails and social media posts. And this is our scale scorecard that takes you through just 25 questions, 3 minutes, takes you through not just the area of leadership that we talked about today, but also the 4 other areas, and gives you a score at the end, so you understand where you fit and where the gaps might be in relation to the sort of perfect score. But it's progress, not perfection. If you'd like to learn more, of course, our book is available, and you'll receive a complimentary PDF as part of the package for folks who have attended one of our master classes. And so that's me for today. That's us for today. And I hope every one of us has taken up at least one call to action and one takeaway around leadership. So here's to accelerating exceptional leadership. Have a great afternoon.